David Griscom, do you have an economic minute for us? You gonna enlighten us
I
on
do
the
have an economic
global
minute.
dynamics of our economic world?
Well, we had to go back, given the strike in LA, we had to go back and talk about what's going on at Uber and generally with these companies. We were talking about these IPOs that are coming up and the need for companies like Uber and Lyft, which is basically have been losing money on all of their rides,
Right.
to start squeezing workers. And as we saw, the people who were striking in LA, they were striking because they have seen a pay cut per mile, 25%, as Michael said, which has gone down from 80 cents to 60 cents per mile. And that's a significant pay cut for people. And, there's no doubt that, the pressure that is coming on, the drivers in LA is coming because of this upcoming IPO and wanting to make the company wants to show that it can be more profitable and squeeze workers even more. And we're only going to see more of this as the next couple of weeks unfold. And these, Lyft is going up for their IPO at the end of the week, and we're going to start seeing even more of these kind of push. So, we see this big strike on Monday. This is only possible because there has been such an incredible movement to start to try to organize these workers. The organization that was really behind this, Rideshare Drivers United, has grown from 300 drivers just a year ago to 3,000 today. And that's the kind of power that is able to, to come at a city like LA and to really make the demands of people be heard. It's important to note that not only are people asking to return to the old payment, they want more. They want a $28 per hour minimum rate. But it wasn't just, LA. Lyft, who has their IPO coming up at the end of the week, they've seen a lot of pressure from their drivers as well. Just yesterday, I believe, in San Francisco, Lyft was having an event to woo new investors and buyers that they actually moved locations day of. And they cited it was because they needed a larger space, but I think it was much more likely that the fact that there was a massive protest that was being unfurled outside of the venue was behind that. So, there's a lot of pressure on these companies and people are becoming more and more vocal. And it's important because, what folks who are, driving in these ride service companies are facing is really steep. Just in Uber alone, there's about 900,000 active drivers a year. But on average, only 4% of drivers are coming back year after year. So if you think about that, that's massive turnover when you're talking about drivers. And it's because of the highly exploitative practices that you see at these companies. They draw people in, with sign-up bonuses and things like that. And then, they start to drive for them for a while, and then they stop making much money. Most of the time, making much less than minimum wage. When you're looking at a company like Uber, the average hourly rate is $10.87 an hour, which is not much at all.
That's incredible.
And when you're talking about somebody who then has to pay for all their own expenses.
Yeah, they have to pay all their own.
Exactly. And they have to, get their own health care and being treated as a private contractor. And we need to talk about this for a second. How the hell is Uber and Handy and all of these other corporations able to get around worker laws that we've fought so hard to put in place to protect people from being exploited? Well, it's because these companies have massive lobbying organizations that have been able to push governments around, and because of the fact that the workers are so displaced, a lot of them are in transition, that they're able to exploit them at a really high rate. So a very important report just came out in the Texas Observer, which is a really great local regional outfit, that they came out and they found that the Texas Workforce Commission, which is a government agency in Texas that basically looks over unemployment insurance for the state, that they had been privately lobbied by Handy, which is another one of these big companies that perform services like cleaning your apartment, things like that, that they had just sent in lobbyists directly into this unelected branch of government to change the rules so that they could, so that the state would consider the workers to be contractors, and that companies like Uber, Lyft, and Handy would be considered marketplace platforms. So instead of going through the legislature, which is where you're seeing a lot of these fights happening, these companies are now trying to find workarounds, to find the government agency that can just implement a rule statewide and can change it. And this was something that was done with very little fanfare. It turns out that one of the main lobbyists involved is a group called Tusk Ventures, which just so happens to have a large holding in Uber. So I mean, it's pretty, it's pretty sneaky, the kind of stuff that's going on. And, don't forget the struggle that you have when you're trying to come up against these companies. In a city like Austin, for example, they had a public initiative to try to force Uber and Lyft to run better background checks on their drivers. And these companies came so hard, and then the city voted for these background checks, and then Uber and Lyft just left. And then we found out that they lobbied like crazy, and they got the Texas state legislature, so a bunch of people from outside of Austin, basically, to pass the law to overturn what happened in Austin. So these companies have massive power, and the only way that we're going to be able to defeat them is, one, through supporting actions like we're seeing in LA. Don't forget, in New York City, there was a lot of success in creating a minimum pay rate for drivers in this city. And that only came because there's a massive amount of organizing, and that's so important. We need to be aware of it. We also need to be vigilant about these kind of sneaky workarounds that are going on. And look, I really would like to see Bernie Sanders start running a little bit of his Amazon magic on these Uber and Lyft companies and start calling them out specifically for what they're doing.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, let's see if they sponsor the convention this year.
Let's see if they sponsor the convention this year. And let's also, look, I'm all for Bernie should, and that's great, and let's always keep constructively pushing Bernie. But I frankly like Elizabeth Warren, who I think has legitimate progressive credentials, and Tulsi Gabbard, who is a very complicated case but has some credentials and is trying to run in that lane, let alone the ones who I think frankly have no credentials but are trying to run in that lane. Like, Joe Biden is the worst, but he's going to come out and give a whole bunch of ridiculous comments about how he's the most progressive in all of this. Well, I'll tell you what, if Joe came out and said, I'm the most progressive, and let me tell you, my first step is the Lyft and Uber drivers are right. Okay. Well, there you go. There are some points on the board.
He would never do that, yeah.
Well, of course he would never do that. But I just want to say in general, I do think there's a dual tactic where it's like there's the legitimate request to Bernie. Like, can you do this because you actually might and you care and it could help? And then I think there's also the other metric of like, oh, okay, other great progressive Democratic candidates. Well, there's a fight going on for Uber and Lyft drivers right now. So, first of all, let's look at your campaign contributions.
We need to make this.
And secondly, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
We need to make this an issue, just like the minimum wage has become an issue. And look, there's some people who push for like a bold minimum wage. There's also the kind of crappy version, very slow rollout. But at least it's becoming something that Democrats are talking about on a large scale.
Definitely.
We need Democrats to start pushing them to start recognizing that we cannot have this underclass of newly categorized workers who are basically working contract work in general. Is becoming this ridiculous class where people aren't being protected, and then people are being forced to pay the costs that employers should be paying, and we should not allow this to be happening in 2019.
You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.